Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sunday service of Now Creations. May I simply begin by reminding you that there is nothing more beautiful than your own spirit. Well, actually, your spirit and the God spirit, when they combine as one. You are a wonderful, shining energy. If we continue to remind each other of this and support each other as we go forward, ushering in the kingdom of God right here on our planet. Two things before we begin today. First of all, tonight, if you're able to join us for Eckhart Tolle from 6 to 7:30, I certainly invite you to do so. But secondly, yesterday was a very important day for Now Creations. Yesterday, 40 of us joined together on Zoom for our seminar From the Top Down, from source to soul to personality self. I almost want to say this is kind of mandatory viewing. It's very important for us to understand the creation process, how we have been created, and then how we create. I'm very happy to say that the seminar has been recorded. And if you would simply go to our website and look under Special Seminar Archives, Special Seminar Archives, it'll be the very first one. I encourage you to download the session sheets from the email that we sent you. It'll provide a nice outline for you. With those things in mind, let's begin. My dear friends, it continues to be a joy to witness our spiritual growth. The key factor in this growth, I suggest, has been our ability to stay focused on the presence of God as our daily way of processing life. This ability to stay focused has been stated in many ways, such as God has become all in you, quite in advance in your awareness. Or secondly, an answer to the following question, what is foremost on your mind? Many of you, I think, can honestly and sincerely say that the God Spirit is foremost on my mind. It's just the way that I most want to be. And you are doing so. And then lastly, the advice given to us by Paramahansa Yogananda when he advised that everyone should talk less and listen more from within. Kind of like saying you have one mouth and two ears, listen a little bit more. In today's teaching, I will continue to focus on listening more. The teaching is entitled Your Spiritual Evolution. This will be fun and I trust very enjoyable for you. I will begin with a song from the 1970s, proceed to share the experiences of 4 of our members, and then especially address the steps of your personal spiritual evolution. So let's begin. The song that I want to focus on was first recorded in 1972 by Brenda Lee and was also sung that year by Elvis. But the person who seemed to make it a big hit was Willie Nelson in 1982. It was on top of the song chart for over 5 years. Many of you probably know the name of the song. It was entitled Always on My Mind. The song was about a love relationship which was often neglected, or at least not very expressive. But then after each apparent failure, the song would then proceed to say, but you were always on my mind. You were always on my mind. It just seems to me that this song fits in well to the spiritual progress that each one of us, in a sense, is undergoing. After neglecting many spiritual moments in our lives, after squandering squandering so many spiritual opportunities for growth, we have been able to say, but, you know, you were always on my mind. The God Spirit was always on my mind. And for many of us now, we're able to say that the God Spirit not only was always on our mind, but quite frankly now, the God Spirit is always on my mind. That the God Spirit is foremost in your mind each day. That the God Spirit has become kind of all in you. With the background of the God Spirit being always on my mind, let me now address 4 experiences from the members of Now Creations. The first 3 experiences all happened on one morning and concerned the calmness that each one of our members exhibited in their life experience. Each of them told me about a life experience which in the past would have resulted in worry, anxiety, or as one member expressed it, kind of jokingly, but I think honestly and sincerely, it would have resulted in hysteria for herself and for her family. And then each one of them said that their experiences of the past was not how they responded to their present situation. Rather than worry, anxiety, and hysteria, they responded with a great sense of calmness, and that this sense of calmness enabled each one of them to move through the challenging moment that they were experiencing in their lives. So you do ask yourself, what changed? I think you know the answer. Although I can't sing it like Elvis and certainly like Willie Nelson, I think I can happily state it in these words: God was always on their mind. It was the God Spirit that is now foremost on their minds and enabled them to move through the challenge. It was the God Spirit that enabled them to resolve the problem. They listened to those beautiful words of Psalm 46, verse 10. Be still, and know that I am God. They did. They were still. They listened. And they calmly moved through their challenge. They had come to know the wisdom and the power that God not just was, but now is, always on their mind. Amid the commotion of their lives, they were able to stand motionless from within. They knew that they were in charge because God is always on their mind. Let's now move to the 4th experience of one of our members. The very day after these 3 episodes of calmness, amid the challenges that the people experience, the very next day, I received an unexpected phone call. The person said, I just want you to know that the more we study, the more we know the truth of life. Let me repeat those words. He said, I just want you to know that the more we study, the more we know the truth of life. Obviously, I certainly agree that the more we study, the more we know the truth of life. But my comment is on the following. The more we study, the more we know the truths of life. I believe that this person was clearly stating that in many religions, and even in some spirituality, the emphasis is more on teaching ideas on thoughts, but very little on practice, very little of going within, very little of becoming quiet. A lot of services are very noisy. It's so important to be able to go within and feel the truth of going in and experiencing the truths that then can become our truths until, until, until you know it by now. God is always on our mind. That's the truth. So we now come to you in today's teaching. I want to focus on our spiritual evolution. I want to do it in the following concrete steps. But first, let me make a comment. Do you remember? Do you remember when someone, that special one, at least at the moment, was always on your mind? Remember that experience? How you couldn't wait to be with that person. That 1 hour of separation was agonizingly slow. You remember those times. You were in love. You were in love. Wonderful, wonderful moments. And whether or not you are still in relationship with that person, your love has probably subsided somewhat. Not that you don't truly love that person, but they are not always on your mind. So the question arises, can there be a love in your life? Can there be a love in your life that is always on your mind, that is foremost in your daily consciousness, that you are excited about, that is always on your mind and raises the quality of the situations of your life? Let's now explore this question as our spiritual evolution. And may I suggest that all of the following steps are involved, more or less, although each one is on our own personal path. But I think you'll find these steps quite helpful. Here we go. Step 1. There came a time in your life and in mine when the way you were raised to find your place, your niche in the world, just no longer satisfied you. Even though you might have been quite successful in the world itself just didn't quite have the appeal for you that it once had. You were ready to change. Such a change might have occurred with the passing of a loved one, a spouse or a child, or even a pet. Or perhaps maybe the change came as a result of an empty nest syndrome, and the kids began to leave the home, and all of a sudden, there you were, by yourself or with another. Or the change might have come through menopause or a midlife crisis, wherein things just didn't seem to be quite as meaningful anymore. Or perhaps simply the glitz of the world. The glitz of the world was not as meaningful as it once was. Something was lacking, and you were ready for a change. You were ready for a new way of living. You were ready for something more. Step 2. After changing your life, from perhaps changing jobs to changing partners to changing your location of living, you decided to try the spiritual path. Again, your desire to change might have made you look for love in all the wrong places. so that finally you could look for love in the only place where it really can be found. You began to kind of look for love within, often after who knows how many times we look for love in all the wrong places. Now, this looking within had two pretty cool things going for it. The first one was one you know quite well. It was that passage in the first chapter of Genesis where it said that you were created in the image and likeness of God. That was pretty nice. The idea very simply was that, well, there was something already within you that you could access. You would have to work to access this presence, but it was something that was already within you. And that accessibility was something you were willing to pursue. And then there was the second thing that was quite interesting. There was a teaching concerning this notion of the God presence within you, that the image and likeness of God within you was natural. Didn't seem natural at the time, but this teaching that it was natural, that this was your natural state of being, even though you weren't quite sure what that natural state of being was at the moment. But it was helpful. It was helpful to know that not only are you created in the image and likeness of God, but it's natural. So you don't have to go on a treasure hunt to find it. Rather, well, it was natural. It was something that was already within you. Step 3, you eventually began to do the work. You began to read certain books like The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle and Emergence by Barbara Marx Hubbard. You went to a few workshops on self-empowerment. And as you became a little more serious, you began to look around for a teacher or a group, or perhaps a church that was a little more spiritually oriented. This might have taken years, but in the process, somewhere along the way, you learned a law of life that was to become major in your life. It was clearly obvious, very apparent, but sometimes something we just didn't know until we did. You became convinced of a law of life that was indisputable and would be directive for you and fulfilled a sense of being within you. That law was the law of attraction. Finally, you began to understand that whatever I focus on increases. That's a pretty interesting law. That whatever you give attention to, that whatever you focus on increases. And you thought about that notion, well, if I focus more on spirituality, which you were beginning to kind of enjoy, it would increase even more. And then you'd like the opposite side of that coin too, because it simply said that what you stop focusing on decreases. You are now ready. You are now ready for more. You wanted spiritual progress. You wanted to grow in those things that were really helpful, and you were happy to dismiss the things that kept you trapped. You wanted progress, and you were ready. Step 4. As you continued to do your work with a teacher and in a group, you began to experience moments of connection to a higher power. Moments of connection with a greater presence, a spiritual awareness that was new to you, something you just never experienced before. You had moments of bliss. You just had those moments where Wow, everything was terrific. Moments of feeling that you were part of a larger energy. And little by little, you began to solve the riddle of life. You began to solve the riddle of life that kept you bound to your limited human self up to now. That riddle of life was you began to understand that you were a part of something bigger than you. You were a part of something bigger than you. And in those moments of bliss, you began to experience that. Let me explain this experience just a little more. You came to realize that there was a presence within you that was more than your personality self. What a revelation. I am more than my personality self, and I am experiencing a presence that is more than my personality self. And using the law of attraction, you learn that the more you focused on the inner presence, the more it grew. The more you focused on this inner presence, well, the more it grew. You were on your way. And in fact, what the great spiritual teachers had taught was also true, that this presence within you was natural, that this presence within you was more you than you. That's a revelation. This presence was natural, was more you than you, the personality self. It was not simply that you are created in the image and likeness of God. Not just that, that this presence within you is truly natural. This presence resonated within you, felt right. It was natural. And the more and more you focused on this presence and followed the law of attraction, the more and more that presence seemed to grow within you. And then the less you focused on the things that trapped you, that was terrific because they began to fall away. You had indeed found something. In fact, you had found that something that was now always on your mind. You had found something that was natural, that was real, could solve problems, and now began to be always on your mind. You loved being in this presence. Step 5. You felt that you had arrived at the end of your spiritual journey, but not quite so fast. You had not arrived, well on your way, but there was more work to do. Yes, in those moments of connection, you felt nothing could ever separate you from that presence until something did. Perhaps someone said something that hurt your feelings. Felt bad. Perhaps you didn't like that person. Or perhaps you maybe just judged that person, judged a lot of other people. Perhaps you had a personal relationship that went awry. Perhaps you had a health issue, or someone you loved passed. There were still too many ups and downs. There were still too many starts and stops. In a nutshell, the life of your personality self, was still getting in the way of your God presence. The truth of the matter was that God was not always on your mind, just sometimes. Better sometimes than none, but not quite all the time. Step 6. Listen closely. You needed to make greater progress. You now knew the way. More time was required. More time was required in 2 ways. First, more time was required to be with a teacher and a group of people with whom you could share your spiritual journey. Needed more time to be with someone who could lead and with a group that were moving in the same direction. You realized that you had your own path to develop, but you also realized that you grew better when a teacher and a community assisted you on your way. And you began to do both, to follow a teacher and to participate in a spiritual community. Big, big, big steps. To follow a guide and to truly be in a community regularly, consistently of like-minded people. And of course, these steps were validated because they worked. They worked. And you began to feel that you were not only receiving, but also you now became a contributing member to that community. Wow. Another big step. Not only did you receive, but you contributed to the growth of that community. But it was the second use of time that was even more important. You began to take more time to be silent. You began to take more time to be quiet, to go deeper within you. Until it began to happen more and more. Until God was always on your mind. You had become the presence. God for you had become all in all. Might I say, you were happier. Other people were happier with you because God was always on your mind. You had become the presence. God was all for you and raised up everything else around you. You're happy. Ah, you are happy. In conclusion, we are now on our conscious spiritual journey. Oh, refining this, refining that, but serenely and honestly, sincerely feeling that God is always on our mind. You have become that presence that is really you. You have become that presence that is in the image and likeness of God. And dare I say it, you become that presence that is natural. The most natural thing in the world is for you to be in the loving presence of God. And you love everyone. And in the process of doing this, together we are ushering in the kingdom of God. Oh, yes, yes. We are doing this together. For God is always on our mind. Let me now take you into meditation, and what a joy it is to do so. Just that statement, huh? God is always on my mind. There was a time when if someone said that to you, you would say, not really. Maybe every once in a while. But now, you've changed. You've evolved. You have done the work, and you are continuing to do the work to be present to the presence that is within you. You have taken the time to listen to good teachings, solid teachings. Like we had yesterday in the workshop. Solid teachings. You have joined with others in a spiritual community. Wherein when we come together, God is always on our mind. We want to advance in the ways of spirit. You have become a contributing member to that community, whether it's the larger universal community of simply extending love and goodness, or within a community of people where regularly you share the Spirit. You have become a contributing member, not just receiving, but now giving your goodness. But more than anything else, more than anything else, more than anything else, you have gotten over yourself. You have gotten over yourself as the final judge of truth. Does it appeal to me? Does it not appeal to me? And you have surrendered, yielded to the larger energy of which you are a part. This is the biggest hurdle. You either have made or are making the shift. So that you can say, I am no longer only on my mind. I am no longer only on my mind. That limited personality self. But rather the God Spirit is always on my mind. It is foremost on my mind. May I ask now that you be in that presence, the presence of the God Spirit within you, and greet it as the Namaste in our closing song. Greet yourself. Did that song just feel right? Reading yourself as the all that is. I mean, have you noticed how much happier, and nicer, and kinder you've been as God is more and more always on your mind? I suspect these two things are highly related. Namaste, dear ones. Namaste.